So anyway, let's move on to what is really important at hand. And I'm sure most of you have heard that, this year the story really has been big data. And I find it odd because obviously we've been collecting data as long as we can remember, but when we talk, you heard the last panel how things are like lost in the ecosphere, no one's communicating. This is where I think data is going to have giant implications as far as sharing data. So this session is really around that, and we talk about big data. But when you talk about big data, you can also think about it as how do you make it small and how do you make it digestible? Because if someone threw me, like they did in my statistics class, a spreadsheet, I wanted to cry. So the whole thing about this is, making data digestible, making it meaningful, and how does it get implemented? So we brought together an unbelievable group. I'm going to introduce Colin Hill, who is going to be leading the discussion, and incredible, the CEO and president from GNS Healthcare. We're really happy to have him here. And rather than read you his whole bio, which is listed in the book, I'm going to tell you a fun, exciting, he's my new best friend, fact about him. He's part owner of a vineyard in Tokai. Is that how it's pronounced? Tokai, Hungary, the oldest known wine region in the world, which is famous for their dessert wine. And don't think he will not be sharing bottled wine with me. Enjoy.
Thank you for the intro. So my name's Colin Hill. I'm the CEO of GNS Healthcare, which is a big data analytics company that applies artificial intelligence to patient-level data to create computer models to match health interventions to patients with the ultimate goal of lowering healthcare costs and improving health outcomes. Before I introduce my fellow panelists, I want to just take a step back and really talk about why we're here. You've all heard about big data transforming the landscape of many industries, from e-commerce to quantitative financial trading and everything in between, from companies like Amazon and Google to all sorts of other government initiatives. But we're here today because big data, which is the exponential increase of data, is now starting to transform an industry that really matters, and that's healthcare. Whether it's driven by big advances in the sequencing of human genomes that have gone from taking 11 years and $3 billion to now today, $5,000 in one day, to the generation of electronic medical records and the great quantities of data that have been catalyzed by Obamacare, or mobile health devices, we're now generating exponential increasing amounts of data across the healthcare spectrum. Okay? This data by itself is not going to transform medicine. What's going to transform medicine is applying new advances in machine learning and supercomputing to this data to now create computer models and find patterns that can now help doctors treat patients better, help health insurance companies lower costs, deliver better care, and ultimately help to empower patients themselves. So with that, I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists and have them say, spend about a minute or two, talking about their companies themselves. This represents really the vanguard of healthcare big data, from the biggest of big companies like UnitedHealth Group to some of the really small, hot innovator companies trying to upend the whole system. So I'll start first to my left with Derek from Jiff.
My name's Derek Newell. I'm the CEO of Jiff. Prior to Jiff, I was the CEO of Robert Bosch Healthcare, which acquired a company called Health Hero. And I was the CEO of that company, which was a remote patient monitoring company, one of the largest ones in the United States. Jiff is a clinical-grade IT platform that helps the digital health ecosystem connect to the healthcare system. In the last panel, we heard a lot of frustration about how do we connect what's happening in the innovative digital health world with the big iron and the IT that's inside of these big healthcare institutions. And Jiff is a platform that would make that happen. We're doing a couple things. We take the best of remote monitoring and digital health connections, combine it with disease management and clinical algorithms and social networking and gaming, and provide a consumer engagement experience that's really different and clinically based than anything that's out there. And one of the main things, two main principles we're focused on is, one is that real-time data, which doesn't exist in the healthcare system, is going to be the dominant form of decision-making data in the future. We're going to move from a world of inbound patients to a world of inbound data. And the time value of data is incredibly important, and it deprecates over time very, very rapidly in healthcare. And so we believe that that real-time data like the algorithms running the people who trade on Wall Street, they don't look at historical data. Lots of them don't even look at financial statements anymore, or it just provides contextual information. What's important is what's happening right now with the patient, with the individual, and how do I intervene. The second is that the consumer needs to be at the center of it all. The consumer needs to be empowered and own that data and have access to that data in a seamless way. So those are some of the principles we're working on from a big data perspective, and I'll hand it over to my colleagues.
Alistair?
Right. Good afternoon. My name is Alastair Jacques. I'm with UnitedHealth Group. For the last 5 years, I've been responsible as Chief Information Officer for our government business, so Medicare and Medicaid predominantly. As of last week, I'm moving into our software and services side of the house called Optum, where we will be focused on enterprise data in particular, but also enterprise business architecture and the aggregation of our very disaggregated space. I would like to agree with what Derek said about the need for clarity around data to the consumer. I think big data is critical to the success of all of us in terms of bringing it from those massive amounts of data to something that's meaningful to individual consumers. So in a sentence, that's our focus.
Very good. Arnab?
I'm Arnab Gupta. Good afternoon. I'm the CEO of Opera Solutions. Like Colin, we are a big data science company. We have about 230 machine learning scientists, most of whom have PhDs in in pattern recognition and the like, which we apply to any data storage. And in essence, what we try to do is to make big data into small data and meaningful data. In the healthcare space, we serve multiple sectors, but in the healthcare space, we're working with CMS right now to build a fraud detection platform for all the exchanges where the federal government will play a role. We're in the middle of that right now. We also work with the provider segment to improve patient outcomes as well as reduce cost for a couple of the major hospital chains. But for me, the whole power of big data in healthcare came to fruition because right at the beginning of the company, we were working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for HIV prevention in India, which was an epidemic at the time. And we used essentially the earlier forms of the big data phenomena to identify what was the source point of all this infection and where was it coming. And we put in an operating model for prevention, which we instituted over the last 7 or 8 years. And as a result of Bill Gates' involvement, the epidemic has been stemmed in India, which tells you the sheer power when you know what you're doing with the data and applying it appropriately.
Sridhar?
Hi, I'm Sridhar Iyengar. I'm the co-founder and CTO of a company called AgaMatrix. And we actually, I guess you could say we produce data. So we're in the diabetes business, and so we make meters and strips for people to test themselves and get their blood sugar number. Now, the problem that we found was that a lot of people didn't know what to do with that number. Now, obviously, if you're on insulin, you know exactly what to do. But if you're not on insulin, then what does that number mean? And that's when we realized that data means more than just the number. It's the context. It's the completeness, and it's the full picture. And so with that, we proceeded to make a device, a glucose meter that actually plugs into the iPhone. And that was our entryway into the world of mobile health and data. Because now, when somebody takes their blood sugar measurement, they get contextual information right at their fingertips at the time that they need to make these types of decisions. So you can look at the data and you can say, okay, well, my blood sugar before lunch and after lunch was so-and-so, and this is how it's been trending. And all of a sudden, you understand the complete picture. Why is my blood sugar not well this morning? Maybe I didn't sleep well last night, and you can pair it with other types of sleep monitors and things like that. So again, taking a line from Jill, maybe we're the small data company that actually provides a lot of small data bits to the big data guys who can actually process and analyze and make sense of this.
So before we get too deep into this topic, I want to give a little bit of context as to why this matters. This country spends $2.7 trillion a year on healthcare, 18% of the GDP, and it's increasing faster than any other line item. Okay. This is going to bankrupt the US if we don't get it right. Now, Obamacare helps to align business incentives for providers and docs, as well as payers. Don Berwick, one of the architects of healthcare reform, pegs the number, the amount of savings this could provide, to be $600 billion a year. That's a really big number. But it's not enough. All right? Healthcare reform does not help us find the blind spots, the knowledge blind spots, and what treatment works for which patient. My father was recently diagnosed with prostate cancer, and once again, it's this guessing game of what drug for him, standard of care or something else. He's not the first man to get prostate cancer, won't be the last, but yet we're not able to leverage the millions of patients who have gone before him who have been diagnosed. And so how much does this matter? I peg that number to be $500 billion to $1 trillion a year, the ability to better match interventions to patients, whether those be drugs, medical devices, operations, doctor visits. And so before we now get into the how do we potentially do it and what are some of the examples of how that's being done, I wanted to make sure that the audience really understands why this is important. I know this is a consumer electronics show and it's all about gadgets and fun, but this really matters. And this panel, I think, is exploring some of these key questions. So with that background, I want to explore one initial question with the panel, which is, how do you actually really get this data? Everyone's talking about all the wonderful things you can do with the data. Alistair, you're having to show up to work every day, dealing with 70 million American lives under management, coming from many different systems and platforms. How do you start to reconcile that into a system where you can actually start to learn from the massive quantity of data?
Well, you know, I could give you a very boring answer as to how we technically go about it, but generally what we're doing is recognizing that the growth we've experienced over the last 10 years, and we're running around 110 billion in revenue right now. As you said, 70 million current members, probably 200 million past members whose data we still own. We have the ability to make sense of some of that information in ways that allow us to track trends and show treatments that have happened in the past that can be then connected to current information, real-time information that we gather and improve our treatment currently. The big issue we have is that because of the way we've grown and the way the disaggregated nature of the US healthcare system sits, that data is not easily synchronizable, exchangeable, understandable, or even obtainable across the board as we look at one person's long-term health history or current state. So what we're focused on at the moment is making sense of that data and aggregating it to a single source of truth that will then allow us to apply analytic applications and analytic thinking.
Okay. Very good.
I just have one comment about, you know, sort of data liquidity. Came up on the last panel, and Alistair gets a lot of data from his systems. His ability to get data from other systems is difficult and limited. And I would just posit it's not a technology problem. There's no technology problem in exchanging data. It's not hard to do. People do it in massive scale every day. It's a human problem. It's a regulatory problem. It's a fiefdom problem in healthcare. It's a, I need to be protected. I can't give you this data. It's a power play, and it's crushing the American healthcare system. So I'll get off my soapbox, but it's not a technical problem. This is not a technical problem to get this data from one place to another to the people who need it in real time. You know, it doesn't have to be on paper. It's just not that hard to do. We deal with it every day. We exchange, you know, millions and millions, and even Alistair's company, they get millions and millions of pieces of data every day from outside sources. This exchange of data is a human problem.
So Sridhar, are your devices that plug straight into an iPhone, is that going to fix this problem? Is the FDA going to turn a blind eye, or what's going to go on?
It's interesting what you mentioned about it being a human problem, and that's exactly one of the things that we tackled in our design, is that we put usability front and center, and basically if the user doesn't have an incentive to do a behavior, they won't do it. And I think in the context of what we're doing in diabetes, if you get a number and you don't know what to do with it, after a while, you lose the passion and you lose the drive to keep doing it on a regular basis. However, if you put a tool in someone's hand that allows them to look at trends, allows them to interpret their own health, then after a while, what you realize is people are incented to find out about themselves. You've actually given people the tools to build a better life for themselves. And that usability actually really solves the data acquisition problem from a human factors perspective. Once the data is there, like you said, getting the data, sharing it, that's not where the bottleneck is.
Okay. So we're now starting to touch on the role of patients in healthcare. Certainly in diseases outside of things like cancer, behavior change is a key part of ultimately changing health outcomes. And so Sridhar, let's just stay with you for a second. How do you see big data helping to increase patient engagement in their own health, which is really important since individuals are going to have to start paying for more and more of their own health insurance premiums and not just employers?
Well, I mean, not to make a joke about this, but actually, if you provide a financial incentive, you pay people to take better care of themselves, that kind of works. And one of the main things about that is that you have to make the information available and digestible so that people understand what to do with it. So our key philosophy is that, you know, the healthcare system is changing, and there are different financial incentives and different motivators that are coming into the marketplace. But if you want to really change your own health, you need to understand what to do. It's not getting spreadsheets and lots of numbers to look at. It's what worked last time and what didn't work. And to Derek's point, the time value of data is very critical, because what you did 3 days ago, like how many of you actually remember what you ate 3 days ago? Like I certainly don't. But I can look it up in my app and say, oh, that's what I ate. But after a while, I stopped doing that. But if somehow I was incentivized to say, well, when this type of physiological response happened, I felt this way 3 days ago. Let me see what happened back then. All of a sudden, it becomes accessible, and all of a sudden, you know what to do with it. So from our perspective, for people to actually change their behavior, they need to understand what to do. And if they realize that they have to get up and do something about it because of financial incentives or regulatory area changing, then we need to provide the right tools and the right education to do that. And that's really where we're coming from.
So Arnab, as the CEO of one of the world's leading big data analytics companies, you guys have applied your technologies to things like the Netflix prize to understand consumer behavior in terms of what movies people like, to also to things like fraud detection and this kind of behavior out of large data sets. How important do you think big data becomes in increasing the engagement of patients ultimately in their own care?
See, I think we've got to look at this in sort of a multifaceted way. I mean, I think I agree with Sridhar in the sense that if it's self-induced behavior and they control themselves, they will be good outcomes. But we also know that most people we know simply lack the discipline, even when they know what to do the right thing. So no matter what happens, if you're dealing with a cost issue, there's always going to be a huge role to play for prescriptive medicine and telling people what to do, right? So the way we look at data, see, first of all, I think this whole term data should be banned. Because
should be banned?
Should be banned. Because what happens is this term means different things to different people. But so the word we use internally is signals. Because in a sense, there is no such thing as big data. Because the amount of embedded signals within data is actually the thing you're looking for. So when we deal with synchronization, normalization, extraction, we're looking for the parts of the data that actually has meaning. So no matter how complex the data environment, we can simplify it and create a single signal warehouse is the way we call it, right? Because what the whole phenomenon in healthcare and elsewhere has happened is that it's not only that there's more data, is that the specificity of the data has also increased dramatically. So in healthcare, when you look at the shift from ICD-9 to ICD-10, I mean, the number of codes are going to go from 14,000 codes to 71,000 codes. So the same phenomenon you're going to look at is going to increase exponentially. So the role, the panel is called man plus machine. So the role of the machine here in terms of analytics and extracting patterns is about getting deeper and deeper insights into what people do and what works. But the thing we have to recognize is insights is just insights. What the human does and what the doctor does is extract meaning from the data. So you're feeding them to get meaning so that the combination is where the power lies. So when we create these solutions, whether it's in fraud, whether it's in pricing in a healthcare, or rather in consumer electronics, whether it's dealing with what kind of prescriptions, we try to engineer the solution so that you're feeding in the highest quality insight to the human at the end of the equation so that the combination works in a more powerful manner. Because that's the only way I believe in which you can not only improve patient outcomes, but also reduce the costs of the system.
Are you saying that we're never going to get to the point where we just trust the output of a data-driven computer in terms of what treatments we should take? And
see, I think you can trust the output. The question is it complete? See, because this whole man versus machine framework where there's all this stuff where the machine will replace man. If you look at Watson and what IBM is trying to do in healthcare, you're trying to sort of mine all the know-how there is in medicine. But the point here is that the machine does not have contextual understanding, doesn't have peripheral understanding of the environment and what's relevant at a moment in time. The human always does, because the machine is a deterministic system. It'll give you the insight in a deterministic framework. What it cannot deal with is open-ended systems, where you have to use creativity, imagination, and you've got to fill in the blanks in a way which only a human can do. That is why I think you have to think of this always as a symbiosis, as a connection of two fundamentally different systems, where the machine gets smarter, but the mind stretches it even further. That's the way we sort of try to craft our technology solutions when we try to attack the problem.
So Derek, at the heart of what your company does in terms of integrating multiple signals in terms of remote monitoring, how important is big data going to be to engaging patients to ultimately use these devices, use the output that comes from it, and to actually change their behavior?
I think it's huge. I think we look at digital signals, not just sort of remote monitoring. I think it's a very limited subset of the signals that are available when you have a digital fingerprint available to someone that you can apply to their health. So looking at those digital signals, you can know what to do and you can know what the person needs to do, and you can have a clinical protocol. But specifying that clinical protocol and engaging that person in a way to accomplish, to make the first step on that path is really the area that we're focused on. Our founders come out of social networking and gaming, which is watching big data, watching people happen. How do you get them to do more things that you want them to do? So it's a very heavy sort of marketing and online digital sort of fingerprinting of people, and then, oh, this person with this sort of digital profile will engage with this, and then you feed people programs, because right now healthcare programs are largely one size fits all. So it's like, how do you take a person who has the same clinical profile but a different sort of behavioral or personality profile and deliver to them a digital intervention that you can see if it's working, so you can adjust it in real time and see if they're making progress along the path. So that's primarily what we're focused on. We integrate with the clinical protocol, but the clinical protocol is just the baseline. It's just the first step, because most people never take the first step. So we're focused on how to get them to the first step, and then to the second step, and then to the third step.
Yeah, and if I could maybe expand that a little bit, we're talking mostly here about people who are already sick and how to engage them in taking better care of themselves or helping physicians improve the way that they diagnose and offer treatment. What we want to do with the data, in addition, is encourage the consumer to be more accountable for their health prior to getting sick. So a lot of the things that we're looking at are tools and applications that big data enables that bring people to their ongoing dental care. Twice annually you might go to the dentist, and wouldn't it be great if that information was connected and was available very quickly as you walk into the office, gathered as you walk out, and held in the cloud somewhere in such a way that it could be synchronized and managed with the rest of your health data. Because that's meaningful when you go for your next checkup or something happens. And that's where we're kind of focused, is on the general population of patients and encouraging that preventative care.
You guys are the largest health insurance company on the planet. How much does this matter to United's top line, bottom line? Is it just a nice to have or a feel good, or does it really matter for how you run the business?
It's incredibly important. I mean, we as a business, and a for-profit business, we are under great pressure, particularly from the government, to manage our costs. And so any way in which we can improve the health and well-being of our patient base is going to reduce the cost of us managing their treatment later. We would rather they don't get sick, to put it bluntly.
Okay. So, big data, by definition, normally means that you have to feed in lots of data. So in the world of healthcare, it means data from lots and lots of patients. So how do we reconcile that with the fact that ultimately we're getting treatments on an individualized basis? And right now, our healthcare system, our medical system, is really built on this concept of a standard of care, an outdated standard of care for a hypothetical average patient. Can big data allow us to transform this not so data-driven, somewhat slow process of redefining and updating a standard of care for particular disease treatments with something that's much more of a data-driven, individualized treatment algorithm that's not just so simple and blunt, but something that actually takes into account data from an individual, whether in the form of an EMR or a DNA sequence or an imaging test or even mobile health signals. So I'd like the panel to talk about, can big data enable this, and how important will this be? And also, I want to get a quantitative prediction of how long is it going to take for the next time someone like my father goes in with a diagnosis of cancer, where it's not just first-line therapy, Lupron, that works in 60% of patients, and so therefore your 5-year survival is going to be X, but something that's more targeted to the genetic aberrations in his tumor and his background and everything else. How far away are we from that world, and how is that getting implemented? And if United has something already going, I'd love to hear about it.
Oh, thank you for that one, Ed. It would be grossly negligent to put a quantitative date on when those kind of things will be resolved, but I can tell you we would love to be able to resolve them, and we have a number of programs aimed at resolving them. Some are happening right now, some are going to be years away. We are focused primarily on making sense of the data at the aggregate level, such that we can represent large masses of information about groups of people and then recognize specific real-time data from individual consumers and relate it to that massive trend information such that it makes sense for treatment for the individual. So I think that's the best answer I can give you on that.
Okay. And how important do you think it's going to be in terms of the impact, in terms of costs and health outcomes?
Again, it's tremendously important. It is our future. I think for those of you who were in the last two sessions, both Dr. Fitzgerald and Dr. Tuckson spoke about the importance of data in improving the health and well-being of the entire nation.
Okay. So Arnab.
I'm reminded, I had a conversation, I think about 2 years ago with Dr. Eric Lander. He's a chief research scientist at the Broad Institute. And he made sort of two comments which have struck in my mind, which speaks to your question. The first one he described was some lung cancer drug, I don't remember exactly which one, which had an efficacy of 11%. But as they started understanding the genomic signature, et cetera, and they realized that it was sort of attacking a subcomponent of the lung cancer, where its efficacy went up to about 90%. So that was one example. The second thing he said, which has always struck in my mind, he said, and this was around 2011, he said if you were sitting in the year 2020, and he said if you're looking at back into the year 2011, he said the difference in medicine will be the same difference as in chemistry, pre-periodic tables, post-periodic tables. He says we are living in a world where we have Moore's law on a log scale. So no matter what we are saying right now, the whole field of computational biology, the whole field of how this thing is galloping forward, most of the innovations and the changes you're going to see, we don't really have a clue about right now. And you're going to see a rate of change which is expanding so fast that in the year 2020 or in 21, you're going to see things that you look back now, and it will feel like we're in the Stone Ages. That's how fast things are moving. And he's a person who knows. He's lived his life in this field.
Yeah. As the CEO of a startup, man, I hope it goes faster than it's been going.
I think one of your investors is in the audience.
It's just painful, right? And there's so much innovation, and this digital health or this healthcare revolution where all this innovation and all these startups and all this funding, it comes along, every 5 years or once a decade, and we're back in one of those, and then it dies, and in the late 90s, we had one in physician practice management, and all those companies blew up, and then they went bankrupt, and sort of healthcare has this amazing ability to just crush innovation in some ways and slow it down, and it's depressing to some degree. But I'm incredibly hopeful because this time, for me, I'm in this for the long haul. I think that digital health is going to change healthcare. I think that what the last panel talked about, I think what we're talking about with big data is going to change everything. I think we're looking at decades, right? I think we're looking at 5 years, we'll look back and we'll have made a lot of progress. Next year, we'll look back and we won't have made much. 10 years from now, we'll have made a lot. I think it is going to accelerate. I also think I would kind of go out on a limb, and I think in the next decade, and definitely in the next 2 decades, I think the insights about medicine that we learn from big data will far outstrip the insights from medicine that we get from randomized controlled trials, right, which is the gold standard. Big data is going to demolish randomized controlled trials as a basis for understanding what's happening with people's health. It's absolutely going to become the standard. And we have an institutional challenge. And the researchers will pick this up and they'll run with it and they'll be the one to publish the papers. But it's going to be a complete change in the way that we understand and learn about people's health and healthcare.
Now, that's a very big statement Derek just made, so note that you heard it here first. What he's talking about means medicine going from an age where very expensive and slow experiments are done to gain every bit of causal knowledge. That's how it's worked up until now. Does this drug work better in this patient versus that patient? It's been very slow, and what hasn't happened in the world of healthcare is the learning from the ongoing data exhaust. Right? The patients that are getting treated every day, hundreds of thousands, millions of Americans are getting treated every day in this country, and that data just sits there. It's not being used. To contrast it with another industry like online advertising, where Yahoo and Google are learning every time someone is clicking through on an ad, that is being used to test and do experiments in real time, right? Just like in the world of quantitative finance. Healthcare has to transform to that kind of always-on clinical trial, a continuous learning system, and I believe that's going to be truly transformative.
Well, one of the things I want to follow up on your comment about why innovation can take so long, unlike other industries, in healthcare, there is no room for failure. And that's one of the key tenets is that, I'm a big fan of the lean startup, but to do that, you have to fail often and fail fast. And you can't really do that in healthcare without ending up in jail. And that's generally not a good practice to do. However, like you said, in academia, that's a far more better model where you can prove out these types of theories and things rather than deploy it en masse onto the population.
So I'm going to challenge you there, that we're not allowed to fail and be wrong in medicine. I understand what you're saying, but on the other hand, doctors get 50% of diagnoses wrong. Right? 50%. Who in the room has had a wrong diagnosis from their doctor at some point in the last 10 years? So hands up. Wow, this group goes to really, really good doctors. So,
Not at all.
Or maybe they don't know they've gotten the misdiagnosis.
Maybe they don't know they've gotten the misdiagnosis. There you go.
Yeah.
So I think I counted around 10, 15%. But the statistic is roughly 46% of diagnoses are actually incorrect. Right? And the other thing is, in terms of wrong drug and other types of adverse events that happen from medical practice, it is the 4th, 5th, 6th leading cause of death in the United States. So yes, you can't be wrong, but yet the system fails time and time and time again.
You can fail with the status quo. You can't fail with something innovative.
Right.
That's how the system is run right now.
Yep.
Failure within the status quo is perfectly acceptable because everybody understands the liability, everybody understands the regulation. Failing in innovation is outside the norm, and running a remote patient monitoring company before, we used to have people say, well, what do I do with that data, right? What if the data comes in and I don't see it and I don't read it and somebody dies?
Right.
They would have died anyway, right?
Yeah.
What if you save 50% of those people? So now we have, out of 100 people, we have 25 dying instead of 50, but the fact that you're afraid of liability because you didn't see it for the 25 and now they're dead, it's like 50 are dead, but they're invisible to you. So it's like, are you kidding me? But that's the way, that's how we work. It's failure inside of the status quo is okay.
So for people who have been in the healthcare industry for a long time, they become rather sober and sometimes pessimistic, right? But of course, we're leaders of startup companies and leaders of some big companies here, so of course we need to be enthusiastic. So, I mean, one question is, what role do patients have in making these changes happen? Because, are we going to count on the FDA or CMS or really big institutions to create the change? In a lot of cases, the answer is no, especially when patients are facing life-threatening diseases such as Kathy Giusti, who is facing multiple myeloma and a couple of years to live, and other people like Kathy who have now started self-aggregating into groups, or my friend who started Patients Like Me, Jamie Haywood, after his brother was diagnosed with ALS and sent home to die. So the question to the panel that's going to lead into the final question of this discussion up here is, what role do patients have themselves in transforming the healthcare system and creating big data and leveraging that data to ultimately improve outcomes? Or should we just wait for others?
Well, I'll begin by referencing what one of the ladies was saying in the last panel, and that is it's really about education. I don't think patients know what they need to do. I don't think they know how to get the information that they need in order to make the right decisions. It's not that they don't want to. They simply aren't facilitated. So much of the work we do in developing tools and processes for helping patients is in helping educate them, giving them the information they need in a simple format, quick, easy, accessible format, encouraging them to gather and share information that matters from a big data and a personalization perspective. And that's a lot of the application suite that we are developing.
I'll go to a little bit of what you said earlier, which is our experience has been so I think education is to some degree important. I think there's a group of people who no matter what, they'll figure it out. There's a group of people who know what to do and don't do it. There's a group of people who don't know what to do. And in a really busy life, in a complex thing, in some areas of my life, I just want to be told what to do. I want it to be prescriptive. Do this now. We've set up your appointment for the dentist. Not, oh, you need to go get a dentist appointment. It's like, no, we set it up for you already because you had it on this day last time. You can change it if you want. I think enabling a little bit more prescriptive and accountability to that, because now it's a digital event. You can see it happen or not happen. You should be able to see the appointment get missed. So it's prescription and accountability with education. It's not sort of being too, I think some people just tell me what to do. And particularly, what we found at Health Hero was older folks. If you just told them what to do every day, here's the 3 things you need to do. Take that yellow pill, don't eat too much salt, do this, and you check in with them. And it's a simple prescription. And they'll do it if you make it easy, and it has amazing outcomes. So I think being very prescriptive is really important. I don't think that works for everybody. Somebody are like, don't tell me what to do, but a lot of people don't know what to do, and they just want to be, just tell me, right?
You know, look, I think the conundrum here is that this is sort of an asymmetric problem, right? Because the current cost structure is concentrated on the L, and it's a 80-20 problem, right? And there is, all you can do with that group is make sure the system gets more efficient. There's a second problem, which is a lifestyle problem. And the return on that comes over years and decades. For instance, Bloomberg saying, don't have soda, has an impact in the long-term health of that population. So what we're trying to do is through the same weaponry, we're trying to solve 2 fundamentally different problems. One of taking a healthy population and ensure they remain healthy longer, and when they get sick, they don't get that sick. And then you have people who are sick, where we can't, because the adherence issues don't apply there. There's simply quality of medicine and trying to figure out how you can make a horrible situation less horrible. And I think we have to think of this problem in these 2 different contexts, because too often we mix them up with the same prescription. And I think you've got to think of them separately.
Well, I'll put a little spin onto this and say it's not just the patient, but the patient community is extremely important. And obviously, like what Jamie has done with patients like me, you end up finding out information, say, hey, what worked for you and what didn't work for you? And this is what you were saying about there's information out there that's not being used. Well, now finally the patient communities are coming together and they're actually sharing information. And peer pressure is tremendously powerful. I mean, I'll use a very embarrassing example from my own life in that I use Runkeeper with a couple of friends. And if you don't update it enough, you get little icons. I just found out there's a couch next to my name. So, all right. So guess what? I'm going to go run now, and it's incredibly motivating. And and what that does is that it prevents you from getting into a state where you stop caring about your own health and your own well-being, because those around you are going to shame you into it, in my case.
But that's the accountability.
Absolutely.
It's not shame, it's accountability to a group. Could be to your doctor, to your health insurance company, to the government, to whoever you need to be accountable. But and accountability in the social setting works really, it's really powerful, right?
And that's
to the people you care about.
Yeah, and it's the patient communities that actually advocate for that tremendously. The bloggers and these guys are tremendous when it comes to voicing these opinions. So.
Very good. So we're going to go into the sort of the final set of provocative ideas for the day, and this is going to focus on what the world of healthcare big data is going to look like 5, 10, 20 years out. And we're going to talk about some pretty provocative things. So we have to, of course, compete with all of the new widgets and gadgets being presented in other hallways here. Even though I'm Canadian, I'm rather competitive. So now we're gonna see how some of these compare to the really super big HD TVs. So the question is, what new applications, what new capabilities will come from this new world of data-driven healthcare, 5, 10, 20 years out. Some of these things might be happening now, and I want to be really specific. Can big data cure cancer within any of these timeframes? Is one question. The second is, and this came from a statement that was made by Vinod Khosla, the co-founder of Sun, and he's a famous tech investor. And sometime last year, he said that computers will soon replace 80% of docs. So that's provocative question number 2. And then number 3 is this all going to work in terms of leveraging data to improve health outcomes and lower healthcare costs in this country, to avoid the US going bankrupt, and to go from 37th in the world in terms of health outcomes to something very different? So I just want people to spend exactly 1 minute each and give your assessments on those questions, or throw in your own big, wild, hairy prediction for the future.
So I'll take Vinod's question, because maybe it's not politically possible for some of my colleagues. I think anybody who works with physicians who says they're going to be replaced by an algorithm is asking for a lot of trouble. I do think in the last panel that the physician mentioned, the doctors have to get more efficient, right? We're getting an older population. There's more people with insurance. There's a higher burden of illness, and there's a declining or stable number of doctors, right? There's just no other way than doctors need to leverage technology. And there are certain things that directive technologies can do within a box, and one of them is analyze pattern of care and recommend diagnoses. So I think that, is it 80%? I think that more than 50% of the sort of basic thought process work that they do will be algorithm driven in the very near future, in the next 10 years for sure. I don't think they'll replace doctors. I think they'll make them better.
Very good.
Absolutely agree. We will not replace doctors. I think the prediction I'd make on big data is that it certainly will accelerate our ability to discover cures for cancer, and it will accelerate and improve the ability for physicians to make better diagnoses. I mean, if you've got broader trend information combined with real-time value-adding data specific to an individual, then you're going to make a better diagnosis.
Okay. Is there any specific breakthrough that's really going to drive the cancer change in your mind?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
So I think big data, what it'll basically do, apart from the enablement you're talking about, it'll dramatically reduce false positives and false negatives, which is a huge driver of waste. And I think you will see that impact increasing over time. But regarding Vinod Khosla, in fact, I met him about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, and I got into a violent argument with him.
Are you okay?
I mean, I practically didn't come out alive. And basically when I told him, he didn't know what he was talking about. Because I said, you view the smart machine as being a replacement while it's basically allowing a human to be smarter. You're not understanding the symbiosis. You're conceptualizing this as a replacement. And I said, therein lies your fallacy.
Very good.
Okay. Good. So, I'll take a slightly different view on this. And as much as we don't want to talk about this, businesses need to make money and profit when they bring medical technologies to market. So pharma, drugs, all of these sorts of things. The thing that big data will do, and you've all talked about, is it's going to accelerate products coming to market. And what that means, especially in the world of drugs, you have a longer window of patentability, and that is tremendously valuable. And if businesses aren't incentivized to actually invest R&D, we'll never see any of these things hit the market. So for me, big data is a way to accelerate products to market, and I think that's going to be tremendous.
But Sridhar, does that mean that the FDA has to somehow change? Because a lot of people have been betting on, hoping for that, and it hasn't happened. So is it that we get data from the real world that accelerates?
No, a perfect example is that you have a drug and you find out it actually works much better for this particular disease state as opposed to something more widespread. Well, if you can show 90% efficacy here as opposed to 15% efficacy here, that's going to get to market and it's going to get approved much faster under the existing regulations.
Just to be snarky, does it not then take longer to recruit the patients that have that particular genetic mutation or such?
Just Google it. Just Google it. You can find patients. Yeah, no, I mean, that's crowdsourcing, and you can get more data through
genomics,
things like
cost falling, and the ability for those tests to be readily available accelerates that.
Very good. This was a ton of fun, guys. This is.
I honestly hate to cut you off, but it was really great. I'm laughing because these sessions have so much good information, we don't even have time for audience questions. So that's good stuff. Anyway, thank you. So they will be outside if you care to inquire after they have had a chance to maybe grab a bite and also take some photos and do all that good stuff. So guess what? It's lunchtime. Woohoo! And I'm going to ask you a huge favor. Otherwise, we're going to have a cluster you-know-what. So if you